Hi everyone, this is section 2 of section 8 in Microsoft Access. We're going to skip section 1 because in section 1 we were just going to talk basically about the user interface, about what it was like to move around, to open files, to save files, a quick access toolbar, all of the stuff that we should be used to seeing from Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint as well. Access is exactly the same, so I'm just going to jump straight onto section 2, tables. And remember from the talk that we had, the introductory class that we had for Access, I said that tables was one of 4 objects in Access, one of 4 fundamental objects, and tables are the most fundamental object. A table is essentially what you put your data into. If you don't have a table, then you don't have anything to put the data into. So we'll just use this section to see how to set up tables. We've already done that in class, but we'll set up another one here and how to move around them as well. I've sent everybody on the Access data files. I'm going to assume that you've put them on the desktop. I put mine on the desktop, so I'm going to jump straight into it. So first of all, I've opened up Access, as you can see, and I'm going to click on the Open button, and the open screen should appear. Then I'm going to click on Browse, and I'm going to click on Desktop, and I'm going to then click on Access ECDL Data Files, and I'm going to select the Geography database. You may get this yellow line which says the database has been opened read-only, and that you can only change data in linked tables, blah blah blah. Basically, to get around that, just click on Save As and just stick a 1 on the end of it, as I have done here, Geography 1, and then click Save. And then if it still complains and yells at you about active content, just click on Enable Content and you'll be okay to go there. So in this geography database we have 2 tables, and we actually have 1 form. Now we haven't looked at forms yet, but we will be looking at them in due course in a future lesson. But we have 2 tables here. So what I'll ask you all to do is have a look at the country table, and we open a table by double left clicking on it, and the table will be opened here. So remember, this is our objects pane over here, and then when we open an object, it's displayed over here in the view pane. I'm going to close down this field list over here, we don't need it. So tables, as we know, are arranged in rows and columns. Each row, remember from our talk, is referred to as a record, and it contains data about a specific entity. In this case, countries. We're recording information about countries in this database. Each column then, remember these are columns, are referred to as fields. So column and a field, you can use the terms interchangeably. Rows and records, you can use the terms interchangeably as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 columns or fields. And each column or field contains the same type of data. So text all the way down along here, numbers all the way down along here, text all the way down here as well. Essentially we can click on any of these cells and we can change the information for that record. So I could delete, if the population was wrong here for Canada, I could for Ottawa, I could click on that and I could delete it. So you can left click on any one of these table cells, and you can change the actual data that's in there. Down here at the bottom as well, we have some controls for actually moving through the records, and it tells you exactly how many records are in the table. You can see down here, where I'm pointing here, is that we have 47 records. If I click on this button here, this is the first record button, I'll go all the way back to the first record, and then I can advance a record at a time by clicking the next record button like this, or I can go back 1 record at a time like this, and I can also go to the very last record in the table, which brings me all the way down to Russia. So that's all there is to kind of manipulating or moving from record to record. You can manually click, or you can use down here as well. There's also a new blank record button here if we wanted to go down onto a new row here to actually start entering in some details for a new record. We could click on that as well. So there's your backwards and forwards buttons essentially, and your last record and your first record if you want to jump immediately to the first or last record in the table. Doesn't matter how many records are in the table, it will always go to the first or last record. We could also click on the Go To button in the Find group on the Home tab. So here I am on the Home tab up here, and in the Find group up here I have a Go To button, and if I click on the Go To button, I can use Some people actually prefer it, but they find these a little bit fiddly. You can do that as well. So you can go first, previous, next, and last up here, and you can also go to new if you want to as well, to actually go to a new record, to start putting information in for a new record. So that's all there is to actually navigating around. See, if I go to previous, you'll see that I'm going back to previous. I can go back to first, I can go to last, and so on and so forth. Exactly the same as what's down here, no difference at all. So that's all there is to actually moving around within a table using the mouse and using the find group up here or the controls down here. So fairly straightforward. In the previous section there, we looked at how to move around within a table using the mouse. Now we'll look at how to move around using the keyboard. And the keyboard, instead of the mouse, it depends. Some people prefer to use the keyboard and the mouse. I'm always talking about how the more you used to get using a computer and an application, the less you'll use the mouse and the more you'll use the keyboard. And Access really isn't much of an exception. So we'll look at some of the following keys that can be used to move from field to field and record to record. And a lot of these are movements that you'll notice only work with the entire field is selected. So we'll see how they work out here. I've still got the geography database opened, and I've still got the country table within that geography database opened. So I'm going to look at the various, there's a few keys that we'll look at. First of all, I'm going to click in the middle of, let's see, record 5. Just going to make sure that I'm scrolled back up and that I'm scrolled, that I can actually see where I am. Okay, I'm going to go to, I'm going to click in the middle of record 5 or row 5, which is Belgium, and you can see that the whole row lights up, and we get this helpful little yellow square over here which indicates that the entire row, the row selector, this is called the row selector, which means that the entire row is now selected. So whenever you click on any part of the row selector, the entire row will be selected. So I've clicked in Brussels here, and if I use my right arrow key, you'll see that you can move from column to column or from field to field within that row. So all I'm doing is I'm using the left arrow and I'm using the right arrow on my keyboard. Nothing else, nothing more to it. Like that. What I can also do within a field, if I decide that I want to edit the entire field, I can press F2 to select the entire field. So the F2 key on my keyboard will select the whole field. Like that. All right. If you keep on pressing your right arrow key, you'll eventually reach the end of the row, because here I am in the last column, which is the language column for this row. And if I press the right arrow key again, I'm simply going to move on to the next row, which is the record underneath, which is the record for Brazil. And you can keep doing it that way as well. All right. You can also use your up and down arrow. So unsurprisingly, that moves you up and down within the table, and it moves you up and down within the column that you're in. So I'm in the density column at the moment. If I use up and down, my up and down arrow, you can see that I'm moving up and down within the same column. So no surprises there. All right, is there anything else that we need to look at? Let's see. I don't think so. What we can do is also look at some, you may be asked to do this, you may not be, I don't know. But I'm going to go to Canada, which is record 8. And if I press the end key, home and end, just above your cursor keys, you'll see that I've jumped to the very last field within that record. So I'm over in the language field, and if I press home, now I'm back to the first field in that record, which is the country field. So you can use home and end as well to quickly jump between stuff as well. You can always move to the top of a table by pressing Control and Home as well, a bit like pressing the first record button down here as well. So Control and Home will also get you to the first record button. A lot of people find that a lot quicker than using the very fiddly button down here, or clicking on the Home tab and then going to Go To, because you might not always be on the Home tab. So it's nice to have keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these things as well. There is a search button as well down here, down near the record manipulation buttons, and if you click in that, you can actually type in a term that you're interested in looking for. So I've typed in, or I am going to type in, Lisbon. And immediately Access is going to bring me to record number 37. It's going to look for the text that I've exactly typed in, or exactly the text that I've typed in. And the text that I've typed in is Lisbon, so it's brought me down and it's showed me exactly where Lisbon is typed in. That can be useful as well. All right, so that's all there is to moving around within a table using the keyboard. This section is going to look at how we create a new database. We did that in the introductory class, but we're going to do it again here, and how you might design and plan a database. As I mentioned in the introductory class, ideally what you want to do is have all of this stuff designed on paper first of all. You don't want to be going back and making changes after you've created a database and a table and put data into it. That can cause problems. So you want to get this stuff right kind of in the planning stages as well. So I'm going to go into Microsoft Access. You can see I've still got Geography or Geography 1 open. I'm going to click on File and I'm going to click on Close because I want that closed. And we're just back to the blank grey screen that you might be familiar with from Word and Excel when the program was open, but there weren't any files open. So we have Access open now, but we don't have any databases within Access open. I'm going to go to File and I'm going to click on New Blank Desktop Database. We're not going to be using any of these, as I said, templates over here. We're always going to be creating a blank desktop database. So I left click once on Blank Database and we get up the following screen. And remember from the first class, I said the first thing that we have to do, first thing Access always asks us what we're going to call this database. And it also has created or will create it in a default location. You can see my default location is C, Users, James, and Documents. Yours is probably going to be the same. You can change that by clicking on the Browse button here, and you can change the default location. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make create everything or have all new databases that I create within my C, Users, James, and Documents because I'm not too worried about where they are because I know where they are. So I'm going to pick a different name, all right. Database 1 or Database 2 is always going to be what's probably put in for you, but I don't want that. I'm going to call this, and I'm copying this. Basically, I'm going word for word, just in case you're wondering where I'm getting from. This is what we would have been doing in class from the ECDL book. So all of this is coming from the ECDL book. So don't worry if you're thinking, is this going to be on the exam? Anything that we cover in these videos potentially could be on the exam because I'm going word from word or word for word from the book, which is what I would have been doing if we'd been able to have the class. So instead of database 1 or 2, I'm going to type in file name, I'm going to type in pets. And then I'm going to click on the create button. And we now have a brand new database created called pets. All right, and remember, you will always have a brand new table created within a database, a blank database. When you create it, it's going to automatically put a table in there for you. In this case, it's called table 1. It's always going to be called table 1. And this is what we're going to use as the first table in our database. Although I'll probably mix it up here and I'm going to show you how to actually add. What we do? No, we might actually delete this table and maybe create another one. First of all, I just want to go back and talk briefly about some of the things that we talked about in the introductory class. We have our table here. When you create a brand new blank desktop database, remember the views. You're always going to have one of two views. And by default, you're always going to be in what's known as datasheet view. If I click on the view button up here, I can see that I'm in datasheet view. This is the view that people who are entering data into the database, this is what they'll be looking at, unless they're using a form, and we'll be looking at forms much later, so don't worry about that. But if they're just entering it not using forms, they're going to be entering it in this screen here in what's called datasheet view. And we can have multiple tables as well, as we said down here along on the left hand side. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to click on the save button to save this at table 1. Okay, that's all I've done. I've just saved it as table 1. The save button up here will allow you to save the object that you're currently working on. And the object that I'm currently working on is table 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create another database, because you may need to create another database. That could be a classic question. Sorry, not a database, but a table. That could be a classic question in the exam. Create a table, and they might ask you to give it a certain name. A couple of ways, different ways that you can do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Create tab up here. So if we click on the Create tab, we see a different toolbar. different ribbon toolbar, and we have a tables group over here, second group over from the left. And if I click on table, a new table has now been created automatically over here. Notice the way it doesn't ask you for a name. It just gives it a default name, in this case table 2. All right, so that's just a very quick and easy way of creating a table. We click on create and we click on table, and we can create as many new tables as we want to, and they're given default names: table 1, which is the original table, table 2, and table 3, and so on and so forth. All right, so I'm going to actually right click on table 2, and I'm going to delete it. And you notice that you cannot delete an object while it's open, so I'm getting this dialog box here that says you can't delete the database object table 2 while it's open. Close it first of all and then delete it. So I'm going to click OK. And how do I close a table? Well, I can click on the X up here on the tables tab, or I can right click on it and go to close. And I'm going to do the same with table 2 over here. I'm going to click the X to close it down. And you'll notice that they've been automatically deleted from here because they hadn't been saved. Now that's normally something that we won't be doing. If I try to delete table 1, it says you can't delete the database object table 1 while it's open. Close the database object and then delete it. So if I left click on this, you'll notice that table 1 hasn't been deleted like the others were, and the reason for it is because every database needs at least one table, so it's not going to delete this original table. To open table 1 back up again, I'm going to double left click on it. All right. Now, we've already seen that this is datasheet view. This is where new data is put into the table. This is not where I design my table, however. This table at the moment is no good to me. I need to go into what's known as design view. So I'm going to click on the view button up here, and I'm going to go down to design view. And then I'm presented with the following screen. And this is where we now actually design the columns or the fields that I want to put into my table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to design this table based on the example that I'm going to be capturing information about pets. All right, about pets. So it's like maybe a pet store or something like that. So this is where we type in the name of each field, so like pet name or whatever. And then we also have what's known as a data type. Now remember, the data type means what kind of data are we capturing? Are we capturing text? Are we capturing numbers? Are we capturing a date or a time? Are we capturing currency? There are other kinds of data that we'll be looking at as well as we progress through the course. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore, I'm going to delete the ID. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to type in the text animal. And I'm going to change the data type from auto number. I'm going to make it short text. All right. And I can either press the tabs key on my keyboard, or I can press the right arrow key. Description is optional. You can type in a description for the actual fields that you're typing in or storing. I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm just going to click onto the next row. And now I'm going to enter a field name called date sold. I'm going to press tab again. By default, it's going to ask me for, or it's going to supply short text as the data type. I don't want short text this time, so I want to change the data type for date sold. The clue is in the name there. I'm selecting, or rather I'm going to be storing dates here. So instead of short text, I'm going to click the down arrow and select date time, because I'm going to be capturing a specific type of data in this field, and that's going to be date sold. And again, I'm just going to ignore the description. Next row down, I'm going to type in price. So that's going to be the price of the particular animal. And again, I'm going to tab over, and instead of data type short text, I'm going to click on the down arrow, and you probably guessed I'm going to select currency. That's a much more appropriate data type for this this particular field name and this particular data that I'm capturing. The next field name I'm going to have is number sold. All right, and I'm going to select for data type, I'm going to select simply number. Now number sold means how many of this particular animal have been sold. Okay, so you might have 5 or 10 of a particular animal sold. So that's what that data type means. I could type these descriptions in here for these data types, but just to speed things up, I'm not going to. The next field name that I'm going to type in is, and it's going to be the last one in fact, is delivery. So delivery. Now for this data type, we're going to select something that we haven't seen before. Down here, about halfway down, there's a yes/no data type. I'm going to left click on that. This will make more sense in a second. And the table structure is now complete. Okay, we've actually saved the design of this table. So if I go back to datasheet view, I'm being prompted that I must first save the table. Do I want to save the table now? Yes, I do. I'm going to click yes, and now I'm presented with this datasheet view. And this is exactly what I wanted. This is where I'm going to start entering data in for the various different animals. Back to the delivery. Remember I'll just go back to design view and show you that for delivery, I picked yes, no. So I'm in design view here. Now I'm going to go back to datasheet view. When you pick yes, no as a data type for a field, you get this little checkbox. So yes, no is good for any kind of data where there's only one of two possible things that you can actually put in for data. Yes would be if the box is ticked, and if the box isn't ticked, it's no. So it's good for a black or white, kind of right or wrong, on or off data type. Okay, so that's how we quickly set up a table and how we design it. The last thing I'm going to do in this section is table 1 is not a very good name for a table, so I'm going to close this down. Sorry, it's actually asking me now if so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to close the table. What I don't want is table 1. Table 1 is a terrible name for a table because it doesn't tell me what's in the table. I can't rename a table, however, while it's open. So what I'm going to do is close the table down, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to rename. Now I can rename it, and I'm going to call it pet details. Press OK. Now I can open back up the table, and you'll see that everything is still the same. So that's the end of this section for designing our database table. In the introductory day, we talked about formatting field properties. We talked about how we can change the default size of fields. I'm back here I'm still in the pet details table, and I'm in design view. Remember the two kinds of views that you have. You have datasheet view, where you actually put the data in, and you have design view, which is where you make changes to the structure of your table and decide what kind of data that the data type that you're actually capturing. What you can also do is you can change the format of the data type. I'm going to click on animal up here, and I'm going to change, we did this the first day, I'm going to change the field size. As you see, I've already done it. I've changed the field size from 255 down to 20, which means that by default, short text, which is what animal is, its data type is short text, which means that you can, by default, accommodate 255 characters for the name of an animal. Now 255 is overkill, it's simply too much. So what I've decided to do is trim it down to 20, so it's going to save space in our database. If you had 1,000 animals, imagine, in your database, and that was 1,000 times 255, that's an awful lot of space that's going to waste, that's just sitting there not being used. So it makes sense to basically condense it down. So I've changed the field size down here for animal, which is, don't forget, short text, to 20 characters. All right. I'm also going to do the following. For date sold, I'm going to show you if you need to change the format. This might be something that they'd ask you to do. You can change the format for date sold. You can see that the field properties for date sold, which is a data type of date time, they're different from the data type for animal, which was short text. So you'll get that with different data types. The properties will be different. They may ask you to change the format for date time, or for some kind of a date column or field, maybe from medium date to long date. Here's how you do it. You just make sure that your date or your field is selected, and then down here in field properties, you click on the format drop down arrow, and you select whatever format they ask you to select. In this case, I'm going to select medium date. I already had it selected like that. So that's all there is to that. There's nothing else to it really. For number for the default for number, what I'm going to do here is, you'll see that when you have currency and number selected as a data type, that they always give a default value of 0. Now what does that mean? Well, if I go back to datasheet view, you can see that 0 is put in for number sold, and 0.00 with the currency symbol is put in for price. Those are default values that are put in even before you start putting data in for a record. I can change those default values if I want. And for price, what I'm going to do is put, let's see, for price, I'm going to change it to 1. Okay, that's all. That's the only thing that you have to do. That's all you have to do. And for number sold, I'm also going to change the default value to 1. Okay. So that's all there is to that. If they ask you to change the default value, and the default value simply means a number that's going to be put in automatically before you actually put in any other information for a record. All right. There may be different reasons why you'd need to put in other default values rather than the ones that are supplied, and that's how you change them. So just make sure that you've clicked on the relevant field and then click on default value and change it to the value that you want to have appear by default. Now, Access has automatically defined the field as indexed. If you look at, I'm going to go back to, because we need to talk about indexing and so on and so forth. If you look at the number sold field, we won't be talking too much about indexes yet. We'll be covering them in a later exercise, but I'm going to cancel what's known as, Access is automatically indexing this number sold field, and down here it says it's going to allow duplicates. It says yes, allow duplicates, in other words duplicates okay. I'm going to change this to no. So I'm going to left click on the down arrow and click on no. All right, so it won't be indexed. Don't worry about indexing just yet. We will be covering it in a later stage, but that's how you change whether a field is indexed or not. As I say, we will be talking more about indexing in a later stage. So that's pretty much all that we need to know right now for changing the properties of each field, or the properties of each data type. Don't forget, each field has a corresponding data type, and each data type, we can change the properties of that by going down to the field properties and making the relevant changes down here. All right, in the previous section we looked at how we formatted the field properties, we've designed our table, we formatted those properties, and now we're actually ready to start putting data into the database. And of course, data in a database goes into one or more tables. We have one table over here which we call pet details. I'm now ready to start putting the data into that table called pet details. I can't put it in here, however, because I'm in design view. So what I need to do is change my view and go back to datasheet view. I've made a change in the design, and whenever you make a change in a design of a table and you try and switch back to datasheet view, you'll always be prompted to save the table. So I'm going to click on yes to save the table, and now I'm back to datasheet view. Now, there's nothing in the database so far. There's one, it looks like there's one record or one row, but there really isn't. This is just a blank row, which is Access prompting me to start entering information in for this particular record. So we'll just make it very, very short, okay? We'll enter in 4 pieces of information, or 4 records, 4 animals. So I'm going to type in the following. Again, I'm purely taking this from the ECDL databook. So I've typed in toad here, and you can move on to the next column however you want. I find it just easier to press the tab key. You can also use the right arrow key as well. It's quicker than using the mouse. For date sold, you'll notice this little calendar popping up. You can left click on that and you can select your date like that. I'm going to type in 25th. I'm just going to type it in myself of the 3rd, 2007. For the price, I'm going to type in 1.5. Notice I'm not typing in a currency symbol. That's going to be added in automatically for me. For number sold, I'm going to type in 6. And for delivery, in other words, do we deliver this particular animal, I'll tick the box to indicate that yes, we do deliver it. When I click on, or when I hit the tab button, I'm automatically brought down onto the next row. This click to add column over here means if you wanted to add another column or field, like for instance, I don't know, maybe the gender of the animal, maybe male or female or whatever, you could do that over here. I don't recommend making any changes to the design of your table in Datasheet View. The correct practice really would be to do it back in Design View. And to be honest, I wouldn't do that either after you've added data to the database. It's much better most of the time. There can be instances where it's necessary, but it's better just to get this stuff right at the beginning. So I've just hit the tab key after delivery and I've gone on to the next row, the next record, and now I'm typing in the next animal, which is cat, and 9th of the 4th, 2007. Notice how it's being formatted for me like this, 9th of April 07. That's because of the medium format and the field properties that I set for that data type. This is going to be $17.95 for the price. I'm going to say that we sold 2, and we don't deliver cats, so I'm going to leave this blank. Press tab, go on to the next one. I'm going to type in goldfish. This is the 1st of the 5th, 2007. Again, it formats it the way the others are formatted. This is going to be 225. Number sold is going to be 11. Tab across again. I'll say we also don't deliver goldfish. And finally, I'm going to type in snail. I know these are weird examples, but that's what's in the book. The date is going to be the 26th of the 6th, sorry, the 22nd of the 6th, / again, 2007. Say 1.1, number sold is going to be 34, and we will tick the box for this one to indicate that yes, we do that we do deliver this particular animal. Now, just you might be thinking, well, do I need to save the changes that I've made? No, you don't. Whenever you add a record and then go on to a new row, the previous record was automatically, if you like, saved or committed, we say, to the database. So you don't have to save as you go along. All of these rows or all of these records are now saved into the database. You don't need to save it as you go on. The second you go off the last column for a record or for a row and on to the next one, all of that row was saved. Similarly, after I'd selected goldfish or whatever, the delivery for goldfish, actually we didn't specify delivery for goldfish, but the second I pressed tab and went on to the next row to start entering in snail, the row for goldfish and all of the details for goldfish had been saved. Okay, so you don't need to save as you go along. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the pets database. So correctly, what we should do is we should go up here to the save button. And what this does is it saves the entire database. The example I was giving to you, or the thing I was trying to get across to you in the first day, the introductory day, was that a database is not really one thing. It's a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of objects working together. In this case, tables and queries and forms and reports. We're only working with one object in this database now. But if I click on the save button up here, it's going to save basically everything. Okay, and I can now close down this database by clicking on File and Close, and I'm back to a blank screen like that. So that's all there is to entering information into a database. In this section now, we've looked at how to enter data into the table. You've seen it's pretty straightforward. We're now going to talk about something called a primary key. I mentioned it briefly on day one. I didn't really mention it there in the last section. I'm going to talk about it now. We've seen that databases can have more than one table. We haven't actually seen any examples of that, but I've mentioned how databases can have multiple tables, especially large databases. And in fact, it's usually kind of more advantageous, more desirable to have lots of smaller tables in a database rather than one big one, because this improves the efficiency of the database. It makes it quicker to kind of work with. So for these databases with multiple tables, you're going to see a lot of talk, and it's usual to see what's called a primary key field. And a primary key field is one that uniquely identifies each individual record or row in a table. This is usually a number like a serial number or an ID number, and we've seen that already. If I clicked on File and New Blank Database, and I'm going to quickly just create a temporary database and click Create, automatically I have a table created for me, and there's also, if I go into Design View, I'm just going to save it as Table 1, there's already a field name a field created for me called ID, and it's got this little symbol beside it of a key. That's how important primary fields are, and that's how Access creates it automatically for you. And it also gives it this data type here of auto number, which means that every time I would add a new record to the database, it's going to have a field name ID associated with it, and it's going to automatically, hence the term auto number, increment one of those fields. Let's see that working in kind of practice as well. Let's go to File and Open. I'm going to ask you to open a database from the Access database files called Daily. So here it is here, Daily. Now I'll get the same thing yelling at me. So first of all, I'm going to fix these two problems by clicking on Save As. The read-only problem, I can fix that by clicking on Save As, and it's prompting me to save it as Daily 1. So I'm going to click Save, and then I'm going to click on Enable Content, and now everything is okay. Here we can see we have two tables in this Daily database, and I have two forms. We'll be looking at forms much later, so don't worry about them right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Vehicles, and I'm going to show you a quicker way of going into Vehicles in Design View. Two tables called Repairs and Vehicles. I want to open up Vehicles in Design View. If I double left click on it, I'm immediately taken into Datasheet View. I don't want to do that. I can immediately go into right click on it and just go to Design View like this, and it immediately opens it up in Design View. So that's quicker than, if I close it down again, that's quicker than double left clicking it, opens up in Datasheet View, go to View, go to Design View. I mean, it's the same thing, but this, right clicking on the table and going to Design View, is just quicker. Now, you can see all of the fields. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 10 fields here, registration number, model, and so on and so forth. But I don't have a primary key. The makers of this table and this database, in fact, specifically left out the primary key, or basically unprimary keyed the primary key field for this example. But the thing with the primary key is you're trying to pick a piece of information that is unique and specific to each record or to each entity. We spoke about how PPS numbers are unique to each person. That's a way no two people can have the same PPS number, whereas two people can have the same name or email address or phone number and so on and so forth. No two cars can have the same registration number. So that would be a good candidate for a primary key. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we make registration number a primary key? Well, easy enough. All we do is right click on the row selector beside registration number, and we select primary key. And the little key now appears from, or rather on this row selector. Now nothing else, it's not going to ask us anything else. I'm just going to save this now by either holding down Control and S or clicking on the save button up here. They'll both save the current object that I'm working on. And now I'm going to go back to Datasheet View. I'm going to click on Datasheet View, and I've gone back to my table in Datasheet View. And that's all there is to, that's how you specify that you want a key or a field to be a primary key. If I go back to Design View, I can right click on Reg Number, and I can say, no, I don't want that to be the primary key. I could decide, although it wouldn't make any sense, obviously, because two cars can have the same color, but I could right click on color and I could select primary key for that. Or I could select engine capacity and primary key for that. Notice the way you can only have one primary key per table. All right, I'm going to go back to reg number and click on primary key for that. Click on the save button, and then that's all there is to it. That's all there is to selecting a specific field that you want to be a primary key. In the previous section there, we looked at how to define a primary key. We saw a primary key is basically a way of uniquely identifying each record or row in a table. I'm going to talk about indexes now. I'd mentioned them briefly previously, and I said I'd go into them in more detail, and that's what we'll do with this section. An index is essentially a copy of a field, which we store and sort separately. Now, the database does this for us. And what it does, or why it does, is it speeds up access to the database. I'll give you an example. If you were accessing maybe a record, a particular record in, let's say, a telephone directory that was based on a phone number, you'd have to search through the entire table looking for the number. which would be very time consuming if there were a lot of fields in it. But if phone number was defined as an index, the number can quickly be found from a sorted list of numbers, and this would link to the appropriate record in the table. This happens automatically in the background for us when we set a field as indexed. That table will be automatically sorted by that field whenever the table is opened. We can set indexing as well on more than one field, and the fields are sorted in turn. This will make more sense if we have a look at a practical example. I'm going to go to File and Close, just to close down the previous database. I didn't need to, but to keep things nice and tidy. And I'm going to go to File and Open. And I'm looking for, within our ECDL data files folder, I'm looking for Geography 1. Remember, that was the first table that we looked at. So when I double-click on Geography 1, it's opened up. None of the objects are open by default. I've got 2 tables and 1 form. What I'm going to do is I want to open the Regions table in Design View. So a shortcut for that we looked at there in the previous section was we right-clicked and we went to Design View. All right. Now I'm going to click in the region field. Actually, I'm in the region field already because it's the first field. And way down here in the field properties where it says indexed, I'm going to go down to indexed. It's currently set to no. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the down arrow here and I'm going to select, I have 2 other options. Yes, duplicates okay, and no, duplicates. So it's kind of confusing because it says yes, duplicates okay, and yes, no duplicates. I'll explain more about that shortly. For the moment, I'm just going to select yes, duplicates okay. Now I've made a change to my table. So what I need to do is I need to save it. So I can do that by clicking on the Save button up here. And now I want to go back to Datasheet View. Don't forget, changes that you make to the design of your table are made in Design View. Now I want to go back to Datasheet View, which is how I would input data into the table. And I do that by clicking on View and going back to Datasheet View. All right. Now I'm back in Datasheet View. And you can see that the table is open with the data sorted in alphabetical order of region. No other fields are sorted here, okay? This field is sorted, region is sorted, but no other field is sorted here. These are all over the place. All these numbers are all over the place. These are not smallest to largest. These are not A to Z, okay? But region is sorted, all right? And the reason for that is because we've indexed it, all right? It's now being indexed by region. Okay, let's go back to Design View. So let's go click on View and go back to Design View. What we're going to do is we're going to create another index. We're going to index on more than one field. What I want to do is I want to create a new index. So make sure that you're in Design View. You'll see the Design tab up here. And we have an Indexes button here in the Show Hide group. So I'm going to create a second index. I'm already indexing this table on region. I now want to index it on another field. So I'm going to click on Indexes up here to open up the dialog box, and you can see that it's currently being indexed on region. The field name is region, and it's sorting it in ascending order. So that just means A to Z, okay? Let's create a second indexing. And the way we do that is we click in the field name here, and I get a little drop down arrow, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to select one of the other fields on which to index this table. I'm going to select country. Ascending, in other words A to Z, will be the default sort order, and I can leave the index name over here. I can leave that empty. I don't need to put anything in there. Okay, so that's how I create a second index on which to sort a table. I can now close that box like this, and I can go back from Design View to Datasheet View. Again, don't forget, you made a change to your table. You have to now save the table, so just click on Yes. Now, let's have a look at this. This is actually now indexed on 2 different fields. If you have a look, region is still being indexed on A to Z, so Africa, Asia, and so on and so forth. But now, country is also being indexed within each of these indexes, if that makes sense. So within Africa, Ethiopia comes before Kenya, comes before Libya, comes before Morocco, comes before South Africa, and so on and so forth. Then Asia is the next region, and within Asia I'm indexing the countries again from A to Z. So Afghanistan comes before China, comes before India, and so on and so forth. If you look at Europe, Austria comes before Belgium, and the last one in Europe is UK. So hopefully that makes sense. What we did is we created two different indexes. We had one index already. We created one index already, which was we based on region, and then we created a second index by going into design view and going up to indexes here and creating a second region by country, or second index, which we decided to do by country. And if you wanted to, you can go as many levels deep. Now, obviously, the law of diminishing returns can kick in at some point, but you could certainly index by 3 or 4 different field names, depending on how many fields you wanted, or that you had in your table, and depending on how deep or how much you wanted to index your table or order your table. Don't forget, indexing is all about simply ordering the table, and it makes it quicker for us to get the information back out. What I'm going to show you now is how to delete an index. Okay, I'm going to delete both of these indexes and just go back to the unsorted table. Let's have a look quickly at the sorted table at the moment, the way it looks. Take a mental snapshot of that, and then we're going to go back to design view. And I'm back in design view here, and what I want to do is go back up to regions. Indexes up here in the design tab. Now, here are my 2 indexes that I'm currently using. I want to delete both of these. All right, so it's a bit tricky deleting them. I'm going to delete the second one first of all. So I'm going to left click on the selector bar like this. All right, and I'm going to press delete, and that's it. That's that one gone. And I'm going to left click on this selector bar here, or the row selector here, and I'm going to press delete as well. It's actually not tricky at all. I was referring to maybe left clicking and dragging like that. You can delete multiple ones if you want to by clicking and dragging. That can be a bit tricky sometimes. But that's both of those indexes now gone. So click on the X button. Now let's go back to design, or rather datasheet view, and have a look at what the table looks like now that both of those indexes are gone. So click on view, back to datasheet view. Again, Access says, hang on, you've made changes to the design of the table. Do you want to save it? I have to save it if I want to go back to datasheet view. And now the table is all over the place again. Nothing is sorted. In other words, the data is in the order that whoever inputted this data inputted. Okay, it's all over the place, and there's no indexing, there's no sorting being used at all. So that's indexes. So that's kind of a tricky one, I know, to get the hang of. So I'd urge you to go back and look at this section of the video again as much as you need to. In the previous section, we looked at indexing and how indexing can be used to speed up retrieval from a table in a database, and how it can be used to sort. And we saw that we also could have 2 levels of sorting. We sorted the regions table by region first of all, and then by country. And then we deleted both of the regions. So I'd advise you to maybe go back and look at how to create indexes, and look at the table beforehand and then look at it after you create the indexing, just to see the difference. It's just about sorting really, and about speeding up getting the information out. Duplicates now is something that we saw that there were kind of 2 very confusing yes duplicates allowed and yes no duplicates, which is kind of confusing when we're selecting indexing from our field properties. So let's have a look and see how it works. Make sure that geography is still open, and I'm going to go into regions in design view. So I'm in regions in design view, and I'm going to select the country field. And indexing is currently not set because I deleted both of the indexes in the previous section, but I'm going to set it again, but this time I'm going to say yes, and then in brackets no duplicates. And what this should prevent is identical values being entered for that field. So I've made a change to the table, so I need to save it, and now I'm going to go back to datasheet view, and I'm going to scroll all the way down here to the bottom of the table. And in the country field, just ignore region. In country, I'm going to try and type in UK. Okay. And let's just pretend that I've typed in some other stuff here. Okay. I'm going to click on the row beneath as if the rest of this has been entered. And I'm going to click on the row beneath. Don't forget, when you click on the new row, the previous row, the row you're working on, will automatically be saved. But the minute I click on the new row, I'm going to get a dialog box saying that the change I requested to the table wasn't successful because it would create duplicate values in the index, primary key, or relationship. Now for us, the duplicate value is in the index because I specified that I wanted the table indexed by country and that I didn't want duplicates, or didn't want duplicate values allowed. So I can't do that. I cannot have more than one country UK because I've specified no duplicates. All right. So we're going to close this object down. I'm going to delete that, okay, and I'm going to right click here and delete this record. And I'll get a dialog box saying you're about to delete one record. There's nothing in it anyway. I'm going to click on yes. All right. So that's what duplicates are. That's how they work. Sometimes you may want duplicates in a table like this. Obviously, we're going by region, country, capital, and so on and so forth. You're probably not going to want duplicates, but in other tables, you may want duplicates. So that's how we set duplicates. That's why we have them, and that's why, or that's how we set them. It's also possible to edit the field properties for a table that's already been created, in a database that's already been created. We saw how to format the field properties as we were designing our table. So for instance, we saw that the short text data type had 255 characters by default, but we saw that it was easy to narrow that down to save some space, make our database a bit more efficient. You can still edit them at any time that you want because, as I said, unused space makes your database more inefficient, especially if you have a big database with a big table and lots of records in them. So for example, you might set a product code field, you might set the properties for that to 50 characters, and then you find out that you're never using more than 6 digits maybe for a product code. So that's all that space that's going to waste. You do need to be careful though, once you're using a database, you have to be aware that changing the field size or changing the properties for a field can result in lost data. So for example, if you change the field size, let's say for a name, from 30 to 20 characters, Access is going to warn you. It's going to give you a dialog box saying that you potentially could lose data. And if you do lose data, you can't get that data back. It's lost permanently. You can't restore that data by then saying, okay, well, let me go back from 20 up to 30 again. The data that you lost is gone forever. So you do need to be careful about that. So let's see how to change some existing field formats. So I'm going to go to File and Open, and I'm looking for a database called Staff. And here it is. So I double left click on it, and again I'm getting yelled at by Access, so I'm going to click on Save As and save it as Staff1. Access has already called it Staff1, and I'm going to click on Enable Content. And I'm going to open up the Staff table. You can see that we have 2 tables here as part of this database, Courses and Staff. I want to go into Staff, the Staff table in Design View. And I'm going to go down to Surname, and I can see that the field size is short text, data type is short text, and the field size is set to 50 characters. So let's make it a bit smaller, all right? Let's type in 20. Great. Let's also go down to, let's see, title is 50 characters as well. That's way too big. Let's make that a more sensible 5 characters for title. Let's go to date of employment, and as we saw earlier, field properties can be different for each data type. So the date of employment is a date time data type, and that has some different formats than short text would. It's got a format data, or rather field property, that we can change. So I'm going to left click here, and I'm going to select a different format. I'm going to go with short date. All right, short date. You might be wondering what format is used if you don't specify what's the default one. It would just be a general date, okay? But I'm going to select format and short date for date of employment. I'm going to do the same for date of birth as well. Currently the default is being used. I'm going to change it to short date. Great. Let's have a look at the salary field. It's currently set to currency. All right. If I look at the decimal places, it's set to auto. Access is going to assume 2 decimal places. That's auto for currency, which is probably what you're going to need, and that would make sense. And let's see, is there anything else we need to change here? Select currency. No, there isn't. Let's try employee number, which you can see is a primary key. All right, that's a primary key. In the field size for employee number, you can see that it's set to something called double. All right, double. We're not going to talk too much about the different kinds of numbers that we can have. No, I'm not going to get into that just yet. At the moment, we're just going to make sure that double is set for employee number. We don't need to worry about anything else there. So I've made changes to my table. What I want to do is I want to save it. Now again, it's yelling at me. It's saying, hang on, some data may be lost. The size of one or more fields has been changed to a shorter size if data is lost. Validation rules may be violated as a result. We'll talk more about validation rules at a later date. Do you want to continue anyway? Yes. Yes, I do. And I'm going to go back to datasheet view and let's see. Can we see if anything has been lost? Well, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't. Let's have a look though. Let's do it in such a way that we change the field size for something and we will see data being lost. So I'm going to go back to design view and I'm going to go to the position. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the field size from 50 to 20. Okay, click on save it. I get the same error. Okay, well, it's not really an error, it's a warning. I'm going to click on yes, and now back to datasheet view. Some of the sales representatives, the position should now have been truncated, should now have been actually truncated. And we've lost that data and we don't get it back, okay? So clearly that's something that you don't want to do. So you need to be careful when you're changing or when you're editing field properties. So that's all there is to field properties. Try and make sure that you're allocating enough space at the beginning when you're designing your table, but not so much space that it's going to go to waste. Okay, so it's a bit of a skill, a bit of a knack, an art and a skill at the beginning when you're designing your table. In this section, we're going to look at something called validation rules, and what they're used for is to set the requirements of values that the user enters into a particular field. In other words, it defines only an entry in a specific format, and it's useful for when we want to make sure that people are putting information in the correct format. For instance, your PPS number has, I'm counting out mine, 1 second. Yeah, that's 7 numbers and then a letter at the end of it. And obviously the UK numbers would have their own format, and American the social security numbers would have their own format as well. So it can be useful for ensuring that we're getting the proper data in the proper format and that nobody leaves a letter off, because they won't be allowed to put the number in. Access will say to them, you're putting in an incorrect number in an incorrect format. So that's why we have what's known as a validation rule. And what we can do is we can set a validation rule and we can set the kind of text that we want access to display to somebody in order to get them to type in the correct format. So let's see how it works. I've still got the database table open, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the staff table is open in design view. So I've right clicked on staff over here and I've gone to design view, and I've got my field names and my data types here, and my field properties down here as well. All right, let's have a look at the title field. Let's set a validation rule for the title field. So I've selected the title field, and then down here in validation rule, what I'm going to do is type in the following. So type in MOR for Mr., and then the word OR, and then MRS for Mrs., and then OR, and then space, and then Miss, and then space, and then Miss. So if you have a look down here, I've typed in Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or Miss. So I've typed in the 2 ways that you can spell Miss, and I've typed in Mr. or Mrs. So I'm trying to capture, basically, I'm trying to ensure that somebody can only type in a title that's either Mr., Mrs., Miss, or Miss. All right? So that's my rule. Now I'm going to type in some text that I want to display to the user if they break that rule. So I'm going to type in the following. The title must be one of the following, colon, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Miss. All right, so that's all I need to do. So I've created my validation rule, I've created my validation text. I'm going to click on the save button. Again, I'm going to get a warning and it says data integrity rules have been changed. And integrity simply means that the quality of the data or the format of the data has and the rules for how that data is inputted have been changed. So existing data in the table might not be valid for the new rules. So I need to be careful about that. It also says this process may take a long time. Do you want the existing data to be tested with the new rules? So I'm going to say yes. All right. And because it's a small table, it's not going to take that long. And it looks like I'm okay. No existing data in the table has broken any of the rules. So we clicked on yes to apply the rule. All the existing data in the table does fit the rule. Okay, let's go back to datasheet view, and I've got the following table. I can see that none of the existing records broke that rule. I'm going to try and add in a new record though. And I'm going to add in an employee number of 1050. And then I'm going to tab over to the title. And for title, I'm going to type in DR for doctor. And then when I press tab to go over to add the surname, I get the following. The title must be one of the following. So that's the text that we typed in a minute ago for our validation text. So I click OK, which means that I cannot continue. I would have to type in Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or whoever it is. All right. So I'm going to type in Mr. and I'm going to type in my own name. I'm going to make myself, let's see, make myself a programmer. And I'm going to say the date of employment is the 1st of the 5th, 2020. I'm going to type in a made up number, give myself 25 grand, and finally date of birth. Okay, now you can see that I was able to add the rest of the records because I didn't break the rule. I didn't break the validation rule. I tried to type in doctor. I couldn't do that. Okay, so I'll just go back to design view and show you quickly that validation rule. It's for title, so make sure the title is selected. And I type in my validation rule. Notice that when I typed it in, the keyword or here means that Access is going to look for either this or this or this. You can see it's put them in quotes what it's going to look for, or this. So it has to be, the title that I type in for each record has to be one of these. And if it breaks that rule, then the following text will be displayed in a dialog box. That's all there is to it. I can set different validation rules as well for different field types. Back in design view here, I'm going to click on the NI number. And I'm going to type in a validation rule that's going to be the following. Now this is going to look a bit weird, but we'll explain it as we go. So in the validation rule, I'm going to type in the following, like, and then in quotes, I'm going to type in question mark, 2 question marks, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then finally question mark. All right, okay, so that looks weird. What I've typed in the validation rule is the word like, and then in quotes, 2 question marks, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hash symbols, and then another question mark, and then I've ended my quotes. All right, so what this is a rule that's going to look for something that's like what's in the quotes. What the hell is in the quotes? Well, we'll see in a second. Let's type in some text that's going to be displayed for our validation text. And I'm going to type in the following. NI number format should be 2 letters. Now this might give you a clue as to the format there of our validation rule. 2 letters, 6 numbers, and a single letter. All right, great. So I've made changes. I'm going to click on save. Again, I'm given this warning that data integrity rules have been changed. So I'm going to click yes. I'm going to go back to view and back to datasheet view. All right. Let's try and add in a new person. So I'm going to type in 111151. I'm going to type in miss. So that's keeping our validation rule. Type in Marty. Her name is Gaines. Let's make her a manager. Let's say her date of employment is the 5th of the 5th, 1997. Let's try and type in a number for her now, which doesn't follow the rule. So I'm going to type in WL78, and I'm going to leave it 2 characters short. When I press tab, I'm being told that the format should be 2 letters, 6 numbers, and a single letter. All right. So let's go back to our rule. Okay. I'm going to delete that half completed record. Right click on it and go to delete record. I'm going to go back to the design view. So have a look at the rule down here. What the validation rule down here means is that it's going to look for any entry that's like the following: question mark, 6 hash symbols, and then question mark. So the 2 question marks mean 2 letters, the hash symbols refer to 6 numbers, and finally a question mark at the end, or a question mark at the end is the letter. So that's the format that our rule takes. A question mark, 2 question marks means 2 figures or 2 letters. 6 hash symbols means 6 numbers, and then a question mark at the end means a letter. So whenever you see question mark, think letter. Whenever you see hash symbol, think number. So that's the format that we want. Now we could change that to be any format that we wanted, but that's the format that they're using for this. So we'll leave that set. I'm going to click on save, and I'm going to go to file and close the database. You may want to preview and print a table. We're almost at the end of this section. It's quite a long section, quite a long video, but we're almost at the end of it now. So we're just going to look quickly at how to preview and print a table. Very easy to do. Let's open a database first of all. So I'm going to go to File and Open, and I'm looking for a table, or rather a database. Doesn't really matter which one I use actually. I'm going to open up, I'll open up Staff. All right. Again, I'm going to, actually, you know what? Sorry, I should have opened up Staff 1 because I've already got that created. So there we go, and I don't get yelled at this time. So I can choose to print any of these objects, any of these tables over here. I'm just going to double left click on Staff, and I'm going to print this. So how do we do it? Well, we go to File, and we go to Print. And we should get a menu like this. Now this works slightly differently from Word and Excel, where you might be expecting a print preview over here. You don't. You have to click on print preview over here, and then you get a preview of what it's going to look like. Now if I go back here, you can see that it's quite a long table, or quite a wide table. Print preview, clearly I'm not getting everything here. It's being truncated. If I change it to landscape, it's a bit better. Okay, it's a bit better, and I can actually fit the stuff on one page. At least I think I can. I think that's everything. So that's how you preview and print a table. You go to File, you go to Print, and then you click on Print Preview, and you can choose portrait or landscape. We'll look maybe at a later stage. We can, change margins and stuff like that, and change the paper size over here, just like we did in Excel and Word as well. We might also want to zoom in and out, so you can click and drag your zoom slider down here. It's exactly the same as it is in Word and in Excel and in PowerPoint as well, actually. We can click on 2 pages. If there were 2 pages or more pages, we could preview multiple pages, but this is all fitting on 1 page, so we don't need to worry too much about that. Yeah, we'll quickly look at how to change the size. So if we click on size, A4 is the default. I could choose another size here, A5, A6. I could choose my own custom size as well if I wanted to. Now we won't bother doing that because you're not going to have to print anyway for the exam. I could also choose to change the margins if I wanted to. I can click on margins and I can type in custom margins, and I can, you know, put in custom margins there as well if I want to. But again, I'm not going to do that. Or I can click wide, or I can click normal as well to have the normal margin settings applied. That's pretty much all there is to that. To close the print preview, just click on close print preview, and you'll be taken back out to the main table screen. And that's all you need to know about that. Now I'm going to run straight into the second part of printing as well, printing from a table. I'm going to open up the geography database. So I'm going to go to File, Open, Browse, and I'm going to open up Geography 1. I had to save it as Geography 1. And I'm going to print preview the country table. So how do I do that? Well, I need to open it first of all, double left click on it, and I'm going to go to File and Print, and then Print Preview. And that's my print preview for the country table in the geography database. Now this does spread out onto more than one page, so I can select 2 pages, or I can select more pages. I'm going to go to select more pages and 4 pages, and this gives me a preview of how this table is going to look when it's printed. It's going to go out onto 4 different pages. It's a bit messy. It's split over different pages. So what I'm going to do is select a different portrait, page landscape. I'm going to go to landscape. This looks a bit better. This looks a little bit better. Okay. So if you wanted to then print, you could click on the print button here, and you should hopefully see a print dialog box. You should be well familiar with this as well. I can change the number of copies here by specifying the copies, or I can choose a page range. I could go from page 1, 2, or whatever. I could also print selected records. We haven't looked at that, but we might come back to that quickly and look at it at a later stage. But that's probably all they'll ask you to do, is maybe how you would, you've seen it before, click on which part of the box you click on to select the number of copies, and you click over here. Or where would you choose to click to choose another printer? You'd click over here. Okay, so I'll cancel that, and I'm going to close the print preview by clicking up here. Actually, yeah, you know what? Let's have a look. Let's imagine I only wanted to print these from Afghanistan down to China. Okay, I would just want to print those records and ignore the rest of the table. So it's similar to what we did in Excel when we only printed certain rows. I'm going to click on the row selector for Afghanistan, hold my mouse button down, drag it down to China. Then I'm going to go to File, I'm going to Print, and then I'm going to go to Print Preview just to see what it looks like. Now that's not what I want, because obviously I want only the first, whatever it was, 10 or 12 from Afghanistan down to China. So I'm going to click on Print, and if I now click on Selected Records and click OK, that's now going to be sent to the printer. Okay, you don't see a preview of it here, but it will actually send it to the printer. Okay, what I could also do as well is click on File and click on Print again, and in the print range of the dialog box with selected records, for pages you can go, as I said, from page 1 or whatever like that, if you need to do that. But that's it. That's all there is to looking at printing now. So we're just about at the end of this. We've just got 2 sections left to look at in this video, and then that's chapter 2, tables, finished. The second last section, we're going to see how to add a new field to an existing table. We can add fields to a table even after data has been entered in other fields, although it is something you want to avoid, but sometimes it does actually come up. Sometimes you have to actually do it because data storage and data requirements change, but you do need to be careful when you're doing it. For this, I'm going to open up the houses database. It's part of the ECDL access folder. So here it is, double left click on houses. Again, access is giving out, so I'm going to click on save as and save it as houses 1, and I'm also going to click on enable content. Alright, I've got 3 tables here, house details, houses, and location, and I've also got a form called house data. I'm going to double left click on house details, and I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, or 6 fields, 6 different pieces of information that I'm capturing about each record in this table, or each house. So I want to add a new column. So a couple of ways of doing it. I'm going to go click on View and go to Design View. And what I want is I want the new row or the new field to be, which is apparently going to be a column. I want that to be in between garage and status. Okay, so I'm going to right click on the status row and go to insert rows. And much like Excel, I get a new row above the row that I right clicked on. And I'm going to choose a new name for my field, which is going to be offer price. So in other words, somebody's going to offer a price on a house. I'm going to change the data type to currency, and I won't bother changing any of the field properties down here. I'll just leave all of that alone. So click on Save. If I click on View and go back to Datasheet View, I should now have a new column inserted before status and after garage, and it's blank, of course, because it's brand new. It wasn't added in at the start. I'm going to find each record in the table which has a status of under offer. In other words, somebody's made an offer on it. And I'm just going to type in an offer a little bit less. So here, this one for 15 grand. I'm going to type in, let's say, 14,500. For this one is 15.5 grand. I'm going to type in 15,500. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, under offer down here. 31,000. I'll just type in 30,000. Okay, just a little bit less. I'm lowballing it. All right. So you can also enter new fields from Datasheet View. And what you can do is, if you click anywhere, let's say, I'll do it this way. If you click anywhere in the garage column, and if you go up to the Fields tab, top of the screen, all right. Select the Fields tab on the ribbon, and then you're going to have an Add and Delete group over here. And what you can do is you can click on, well, again, there's a number of different ways you can do it. You can click on Short Text here, which means it's going to add a new short text field. So if I click on Short Text here, you can see that Field 1, it's going to give it a default name of Field 1, a new short text data field, or field with a data type of short text has been added to the right of the column that I was in. All right, that's the way you can do it. If I go back to Design View, you'll see that Field 1 was added in here and that it was automatically given short text. Okay. Now I'm going to delete that row. So I'm going to right click on Field 1 and I'm going to go to Delete, and I'm going to click Yes, and that's it. I click on Datasheet View again. I have to save the table. You'll see that Field 1 is now gone. It had been beside garage and it's gone. And finally, we want to see how to delete a table itself, which is easy enough to do. I'm going to close this down, close this houses database down, and I'm going to open up a database called Mailing. So there it is. Again, I'll have to save it as Mailing 1, security, and I'll have to enable content. Okay, I've got 3 tables here in this mailing database. We won't bother opening up any of them. We're going to simply delete one of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on Old Mail and I'm going to select Delete. And I get a dialog box saying, do you want to delete the table? Deleting the object will remove it from all groups. We'll worry about that later. I'm going to click on Yes, and then that's it. Okay, that's it. Now I can undo that if I want to. You see I clicked on the undo button up there. We're going to talk about undo in a later lesson and in a later video, but for now, yeah, I can undo that if I want to. So that's one way of deleting it. I can also left click on the table and I can simply press the delete button and I can click on Yes, and that also undoes it. Again, I'm going to undo. And that also deletes it, should I say. I'm going to undo again, bring it back. Notice that if a table is open, if I right click on Old Mail is now open. If I try and delete it now, you can't delete something while it's open, okay? So I need to close it first of all, and then I can delete it. All right, that's it. So that is the end of section 2, tables. I'd advise you to work along with the data files that I sent you if you can. If you can't work with them, then at the very least, look through the video. I'm going to leave comments enabled on the video as well so that people can ask questions, and I'll try to get to them when I can. I'm not going to be, I can't say that I'll get to them the second you ask it, but I will check in pretty regularly, given that we're now kind of conducting our classes remotely. So I'll try to answer whatever questions that any of you might have. It takes a while to get these videos together as well, to edit them and stuff, and to record them as well. So it's going to be a few days before I have chapter 3. But you know, I should get to the end of chapter 8 within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so I'll let everybody know when the next video is live. And thanks for watching.